All right, welcome everybody again to part two of the Rings of Power, our review of the overall show, the whole season, I guess, here. And with me again this week, we have Brett and Joe and Justin. How about we just say if there's one thing we've been up to recently? I've been watching the TV show Manifest again some more, which still has hooked me in, Brett. I still don't know if it's good or not, but it is hooking me in a little bit.
Well, it continues to build.
I don't know how they can go to a season 2 on this. I'm on like episode 12, I think, which is pretty close to the end of season 1. So that's what I've been up to. How about somebody else?
We got a cat recently.
Meow.
Yeah, so a lot of my time leading up to that has been spent making sure breakable things are at least somewhat out of reach, because she's a younger cat, only about a year old, so she does like to climb and jump and stuff. So so far we've had her for this is the second day, and she's getting along pretty well. Seems like she's settled in. Hasn't been as destructive as I was afraid of yet. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Congrats on that.
Thank you.
That's super exciting to have a new pet.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you've been up to, Brett.
We binged. So they released the fourth season of Manifest, the first half of it, so 10 episodes.
Wow.
We binged through all those in like 3 days. So it's pretty good. It is getting apocalyptic.
Whoa.
Let's go with that word.
Interesting.
Spoilers.
Yeah. So that'll totally make sense when you get to that point. But we enjoy it. Other than that, we also binged through a show on Netflix called 1899. And
I want to watch that. It looks awesome.
That show is not what you think it is.
Is it good though?
It's enjoyable. It was really weird. Was that it was really interesting, but there was only like 2 episodes that I actually stayed awake for. I don't know what to make of that, but I thought it was really cool. I loved it, but it was I also fell asleep for the parts. I don't know what to make of that.
Interesting.
So yeah,
I think I just saw one still screen of that on like the Netflix screensaver that rolls through, but I don't know anything about the actual show. So
yeah, and from the first couple episodes, you'll think it's the one thing. When you get to the end, you're like, this is not what I thought it was.
Interesting.
I believe it's from the creators of Dark, which I have not watched, but I've heard is very good.
Same.
That's also on my list.
But it's on my list. I guess one thing I want to shout out is I've been watching season 2 of an HBO Max series called The White Lotus. And it turned out to be an anthology series, which each season is set at a different resort that's owned by a company called The White Lotus. And the first season is set in Hawaii. The second season is set in Italy, in Sicily specifically. And it's kind of about rich people being terrible. There are these like very fancy, like super high-end resorts. And so it's kind of the first season you see more from the like staff's perspective, but it's still mostly about the rich people. And the second season, I feel like so far you see less from the staff's perspective, but it's kind of like it's funny and dramatic and like uncomfortable but it's really good. And I mean, it's another thing like Rings of Power that is just beautifully shot. Like they really make the most of the locations that they film these in. And a lot of well-known people in the cast too. Season 2 has Aubrey Plaza and F. Murray Abraham and Jennifer Coolidge, who's great and everything. So it's a fun show for anyone who has HBO Max out there.
Somebody literally just told me to watch a show on HBO Max, and I can't remember who it was or what show it was now.
There are a lot of good shows on there, at least until Discovery destroys the platform next year.
Yeah.
You know what? I think actually it was Apple TV. It was when I saw Dave last weekend, and he told me there was a show I should sign up for. Was
it Severance?
That was mentioned, but I don't know if that was the one. It might have been the one, but I don't know if it was the one.
We actually just watched the first episode of that a couple days ago.
I know he loves that show though too.
Too.
He did just mention that. But there was, I don't know if it was that one or a different one though, but he was like, get it for just the 1 week trial offer and watch the whole show and then just drop it if you want to. But it might have been that show because I know he did talk about that one, but I thought there was a second one. No, I think there was another one. It was like more
Ted
like
Lasso?
No, it was like a mysterious one.
Severance is mysterious.
Yeah, I don't know if it was that one though, but I know he does talk about that one sometimes. So there's that.
Bad
Well, anyway,
Sisters was a Bad
ladies
Sisters.
and
I'm just
gents.
going to name all the Apple Plus shows.
It might ring a bell, it might not. We're going to jump back in here to finishing up the plot lines of the Rings of Power. We have Galadriel left to talk about of the 4 main plots here today, and then we'll talk about final thoughts here. And I think Joe has previewed that he has a little game for us to play, and we'll give our final ratings on all of this. So we'll see where all that goes. So let's get into it. Plot then here is Galadriel's, and this has Halbrand and Isildur and some of the other people from
Isildur.
Some the island place. Is that
Numenor.
Is that Numenor?
Yes, Numenor.
Okay. So we have a pretty wide, I mean, she's only there for a few episodes technically, but they really kind of ramp up the politics in that island country and try to introduce us to quite a few people here. So we have Muriel, we have the king, we have Elendil, we have Isildur, we have
It's a lot.
Arian. I mean, if that's how you say her name. Arian?
Something like that. Yeah,
Eventually-
there were a lot of characters introduced here, and
Pharazôn, who has the most majestic look ever.
Yeah, he do.
Kemen. I don't know how to say that name. Anyway, so let's talk. She's got quite a plot line here. So what worked for you and didn't work for you here with Galadriel and Halbrand's adventure time?
I don't want to take point on this one. I have a lot to say, and I will let someone else take point on this one.
Okay. Well, start with Brett. What do you got, Brett? Anything you liked about the Galadriel plot line and her majestic adventures?
I guess I would start with so Morfydd Clark, I thought did really well as Galadriel. I felt like she
that
fit
Uggo.
very well. I know. I just couldn't get past it. It's just too hard. I thought most of it was pretty good. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but once you get to the big reveal at the end, a lot of that storyline comes into question. A lot of it. So
just let it happen, Brett.
Do I just throw it out there right away?
Through you.
Okay, so the big reveal at the end, which I didn't have a problem with the fact that Halbrand ended up being Sauron. I was like, okay, that's a cool
Wait,
twist. What? Oh,
Halbrand is Sauron? What?
Well, technically, Sauron was Halbrand, but
It's true.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. I don't know.
I didn't have a problem with that twist, except that then you go back and think like, well, did he know this the whole time? He must have. And so what, like the entire storyline at that point.
Are you saying did Halbrand know that the whole time, or did who know that the whole
Did he know that he was Sauron?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would assume so.
By the way he talks at the end, you have to assume that he did. But it doesn't make sense. Like, what the hell is he doing in the middle of the ocean on this like wreck of a ship? Why was he helping them through the rest of the plot line until the end? Was the entire thing him somehow knowing that he would get to a point where he can help the elves make these rings? It just, a lot of that does not make any sense. If they had just had I'm sure there would have been a fairly easy way they could have like shoehorned in something where like he remembers, like he totally didn't know he was Sauron. He just thought he knew he was Halbrand, and then like something like jars his memory, and then he's like, oh, I am Sauron, and then whatever would be totally fine. But they didn't do that, so I don't know what the hell was going on that whole time now.
I would be curious to rewatch this season. I mean, I listened to a lot of other podcasts talking about this, and people are speculating that Halbrand was Sauron pretty much from the beginning. But I think it'd be interesting to rewatch it knowing that, just to see if there are like breadcrumbs planted throughout to point to that.
Yeah.
I mean, when we first meet him, like he's an asshole right from the start. He's just like
He's an
abandoning these
asshole.
people, like letting them get eaten by the sea monster thing. Like, I mean, so he's never really like a super good guy.
He prefers Seaminster.
But it does. I mean, I would assume that he's playing a long con and that he is, doing everything he does to try to like to try to get Galadriel to kind of and everyone to play into his hand and do his like achieve his ultimate goal. But I mean, I do kind of agree, Brett, that it's not really clear that that's the case, and a lot of it does feel like maybe it doesn't add up. But I am probably going to watch this again at some point, so I'll be curious to see if maybe knowing that it feels like it adds up a little bit more.
I kind of just assumed he was like trying to reform himself from who he was, but then I don't know if that's the case, why he suddenly is like, nope, I'm evil again.
That's what it felt like to me, because he did not want to go back to the Southlands, or
That's
he did
true.
not want to go to Middle Earth. He seemed like he was content, taking up smithery in Numenor.
He had his college credit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've kind of read a little bit of like the lore, and Justin, maybe you can speak to this, but
Sure.
I've read that like Sauron was not actually evil, or like not always evil, and that especially like after the fall of Morgoth, that he actually like tried to like be good, but he was not allowed to.
Yes. It has been a while since I've read the Silmarillion, but from what I recall, it was the Silmarils themselves, the things that kind of give the elves their longevity, their light, all that he came into contact with them, or he sought them out, and their beauty was to such an extent that they very nearly, overcame the evil within him. Like he was very nearly on the cusp of being a decent person after that. I don't remember exactly what it was that caused him to, shift back towards darkness, but there was a time in the history of the world where he could have gone either way, basically, and it was because of the light of the Silmarils. It was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, and that beauty almost elevated him to goodness.
And like that's really interesting, and I feel like the show kind of tries to make it complex here, but it doesn't try hard enough. Like I said, like Adar I thought was interesting because he was complex. Like, you really see the conflict within him. Here, like, first of all, taking a step back, the way that Galadriel pieced together the fact that Halbrand was Sauron just didn't really work for me. Like, it's like a lightning bolt that just hit her out of nowhere. And I feel like I needed a little bit more explanation of that. Well, but she confronts him and he's basically just like, yes, I'm evil, bitch.
Well, they did have a line in there. I just rewatched most of the last episode while I was making dinner tonight, just as trying to refresh my memory on some things. And there's the scene there where she figures it out, and he's like, essentially it's like, hey, you and I could be like king and queen of this whole thing.
Yeah.
And, and the way he's talking about it is not like we're going to like, pain and suffering on everyone. He's just like, we're just going to be the king and queen. And I mean, the rest of the people are just going to have to step and get in line.
I feel like that was the show trying to add some of that complexity, but I just didn't really feel it, because I think he even says, like, I think the idea is that he is who he is, but maybe she could help balance him out, when they're ruling together.
Yeah. Like she's supposed to make him better.
Yeah. But it's like, it's done so quickly, and like the overall tone of that sequence has this kind of like evil vibe to it that it doesn't really work. And I mean, I think it would have been a lot more interesting if he had come off as being more like tortured and genuine, like he's really trying to, do good, but he's struggling against his own nature.
Yeah, that would be more interesting. The scene definitely comes off more as he's trying to convert her to the dark side rather than He's
Yeah.
trying to find some middle ground.
Well, it almost reminded me, and I mean, maybe it was an intentional callback to in the movies. There's the scene with Frodo and Galadriel, and it's where Galadriel kind of like we see her physically change a little bit, where she's talking about how if she had the One Ring, like she would be a queen, wicked and mighty, and whatever she says there.
Treacherous as the dawn, or whatever. Yeah,
like this sequence kind of reminded me of that, where it's like Sauron kind of trying to seduce her, or like showing her what she could be, other than the righteous elf that she is.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I mean, going back to the initial question of what we liked about this storyline, I do want to agree with what Brett said, that I do think Morfydd Clark is great. It's too bad she's so unattractive, according to the internet. But no, I mean, again, when they announced that it was going to heavily feature young Galadriel, I was like, I mean, I was not an internet weirdo who, thinks that Cate Blanchett is the be all and end all, but she's an amazing actress. Mm-hmm. And, how do you find someone to kind of fill those elven shoes? But I think Morfydd Clark is fantastic throughout. I mean, especially even with like the action sequences, like the way that she moves and the sword fights and things like that. Really worked for me. Like you believe that she is a fierce warrior. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this soon, but in the end of the podcast, I do feel like everything kind of falls apart at the end of this series.
Agreed. Just kidding.
Anyway, what do you think, Farazan?
Stuff. I like most of her stuff. I mean, she's kind of like the driving force for like the location changes in the show, and so that's where we kind of get to experience Middle Earth a little bit here with her and following her. I thought the relationship with her and Halbrand was pretty good. I thought he was kind of an interesting character, but it definitely seemed a little shady. I did not know right away that he was going to be Sauron. I didn't know how they were going to do that. See, I watched this behind everybody, which I kind of mentioned, but I had seen a non-spoiler but also spoiler headline somewhere along the time that I wasn't caught up on the episodes that Sauron was going to be revealed or had been revealed in the show, but thankfully, thank God, the headline didn't like spoil who it was that was going to be that character. So I knew that was going to happen as I watched the last 4 or 5 episodes, but I didn't know exactly who it was going to be. And I really thought it was going to be Poppy, but it wasn't. So that was nice. But I don't know. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I liked a lot of the stuff on the island country of Numenor, but it again felt like they like suddenly wanted us to care about like 6 characters of like 1 second, and I was like, I don't know who all these people are, what role they're supposed to play in this show, and it was kind of weird. There was like the emphasis on like the king, and like, was that his daughter? Right, it was his daughter, right? Muriel was his daughter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who was like running the country, and then I don't know, it just kind of went weird, like secret passages and gazing balls and tidal waves are going to hit everything, and like it was a lot of stuff kind of thrown in one scene or one little area all at once. But yeah, I thought she did a really good job, like you all said. I also thought, was this Charlie Vickers? Is that what I saw his name was? That played Halbrand / Sauron. I thought he did a good job also.
Right. Yeah.
Really, I thought everybody in the human city did a really nice job acting, even like the younger guys and the captain.
I thought the cast overall for the whole show was really strong.
Yes. Acting wise, I would probably agree with you, but not everybody agrees with us on that, which we'll get to in a bit here also. I don't know, anybody else have anything specifically on this before we talk about like the actual ending scene here?
Sure. And like I said, This is why I didn't want to take point. I'll agree with you on the acting, because I mean, fine performances in general across the board. What they were given to work with was not always as good. Case in point, so am I have to be the one to point out that Galadriel is the entire reason that Sauron made it back to Middle Earth, because she kept insisting, "You're the king of the Southlanders. You have this random sigil that you found off a dead person that you told me you found off a dead person." It's like if I found Elon Musk dead on the side of the road and I took his wallet and I have his credit card, that means I'm Elon Musk. No, that's the kind of logic at work here. It doesn't make sense. And he keeps saying, "No, I'm not." He keeps trying to not go over there, and she keeps prodding him to go over there, and that's the only reason he makes it to Middle Earth. And that's the only reason that, he is now the threat that we see in the rest of the Lord of the Rings. And if she had just left well enough alone and gone on her own way back to Middle Earth and left him to do his smithing in Numenor, things could have been very, very different. But no, Galadriel always has to be right about everything. And that got old really freaking quick to me, because she shows up. Let's just take Numenor as an example. She shows up, and one of the first things she does is demand ships and soldiers and all this help from the Queen Regent, or Queen Regnant, technically it should be, because she's not standing in it. That's terminology. I'm not going to get into that. But so she starts demanding all this aid just with barely setting foot in this place. And that's not how you go about winning allies. And you could argue that, okay, that's the elven mindset coming in again. Like they know she knows what's at stake, so everyone should just listen to her. But
they rush everything because time works differently for them.
But that's how everything goes with her. Like every confrontation she has, there's no compromise, there's no negotiation. It's just she has to have things her way all the time, and if not, she's just going to bust out of prison or beat people up until she gets her way. I found her to be a tremendously unlikable character.
I agree, at least to some extent.
Yeah, her performance was fine in conveying what she was given, but what she was given was not good material.
Yeah, so I feel like maybe that's going to be like an arc for her character going forward, but she needs to have learned a lesson before the end of this season, for sure.
Yeah, I one could only hope, but it doesn't really feel like she does, except maybe when she realizes the error of her ways and that she has brought this evil, to where it ends up being in the end. But can we also talk about how ridiculous it is that she survived the eruption of the volcano and that anyone survived the eruption of that volcano? Because there's this little thing called Pompeii, which seemed very much in line with the violence of that volcanic eruption. And let me tell you,
when were you at Pompeii?
What was that?
I said, when were you at Pompeii? Come on.
Don't worry. I wasn't. That's the point. If I was, I would have been dead instantly.
Well, time works differently for humans, so.
I mean, this is fantasy, Justin. So
yes, but you can't just wiggle your fingers and say plot armor because fantasy. I mean,
they did it though. They just did it. You saw it. You saw
but it doesn't make it good.
They probably escaped while those letters were being etched onto the screen. More.
It's true.
But they were humans, actual human beings. You might say, okay, Galadriel's an elf. They've got some sort of mystical protection against, natural disasters or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, but they were humans that were still hobbling around after being swept through with a pyroclastic flow. That doesn't happen. I got to that scene and I'm like, well, they can't kill her off because we know she continues to exist in the movies later on, which is also kind of my major problem with prequels. But I didn't know how she was going to survive it, and I still don't know how she survived it. She's just stumbling up out of the ashes, and I'm like, okay, you're fine. Your hair is still, nicely done. Like you just walked out of the salon. You're a bit dusty, but that's it. That's not how volcanoes work.
That honestly didn't bother me. But speaking of this being a prequel, I will tell you what did bother me. Mm-hmm. Isildur.
Yeah.
So the fact that Isildur is in this series and the fact that there are multiple times where we're supposed to believe he's in danger. Literally the very first scene of the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies shows how Isildur is the one who cuts the ring from Sauron's hand, thus, ending the war for now, but setting a series of other calamities in motion. So like the very first thing, even if you are not a book reader like myself and have only seen the movies, the first thing you learn is that Isildur lives to be a little bit older and a great warrior.
Thank you.
And yeah, when I first heard his name and realized that this was Isildur, I was like, oh, that's cool. But the fact that there are multiple times where they put him in peril and we're supposed to actually believe that he's in danger, like, no, that doesn't work at all. There's just no tension there.
Agreed.
Maybe
I
it's
was looking
his
for a
son.
spot to bring that up, so thank you for beating me to that.
Isildur the Fourth.
That's true. We don't know that it's actually the same character. It could be just a
But we do,
Same.
because we know that
Ooh.
he's what's his fuck's son.
What's his
Uh,
fucks?
I can't remember his name, but
Elenir or something like that.
Yeah, the
I
elf
remember.
friend. I remember the translation. I don't remember his actual name off the top of my head.
Tom Bombadil.
What if Sauron's not really Sauron? Speaking of that idea,
What-
like what if
Uh,
well just listen, like what if Adar says he killed Sauron? What if Sauron is not necessarily a person per se, but like this entity that like reincarnates itself, and Halbrand didn't know he was the new Sauron.
I mean, Sauron is a shapeshifter,
Yes.
Mhm.
but I don't know. I mean, I'm curious who Adar killed that he thinks was Sauron, but
Maybe he did
Yeah.
kill him and then he came back. as
maybe he
somebody
thought
else.
he killed
Maybe.
him and he came back.
mhm.
Maybe
Like
he
if he
did
didn't see
kill
the
him and he
body.
came
Yeah.
back.
I don't think that's how it works.
Well, let's talk about the final scene and then we'll get into what could be and what could not be.
All right.
Okay, let's go to the Elven Forge, where somehow, back to Justin's alloy conversation, we have now started to get this little bit of mithril out there to forge 3 rings, apparently. Who's got problems with this? Anybody? Or praises? We'll start with praises. None? Okay, let's go to problems then.
Can I, I'm sorry. Can I throw back to an earlier sequence?
Only if I can rock this hair in the background.
I forgot to bring up one thing that bothered me about the Elven sequence, and that was I loved Durin's wife Disa,
Mhm.
but there's a scene where she kind of gets all ring lusty and kind of turns evil, and that just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
Where she's talking about how like Durin will be king and they'll rule multiple kingdoms together, and it just felt like it came out of nowhere. And like I'm assuming that that's like her somehow being corrupted by the mithril, but I don't know if that's a thing. Like it was just weird.
Yeah, somewhere I have a note about that too. It struck me as pretty odd as well. We'll
So
see if
I
anything comes of
didn't,
it.
this could just be me. Sometimes I watch stuff and I'm dense, but I didn't follow the like mithril line of logic on this show at all. With
How do you
like,
mean?
well, they were just like, everything here we have is dying. The light of the elves is going out. We need something that has like this original primordial power of like bizarre lightning strike infused rock called mithril, which is down in this mine that the dwarves had. And like in the other shows, like the original trilogy, like that shit's just like everywhere. So
Mhm.
I don't know. It's just kind of weird that they were like, here's this unknown substance that we're not going to let anybody get in and mine. And then in the original trilogy, they're like, you get mithril armor and you get mithril armor and you get mithril armor. And it's like,
It's a
I
damn
don't
good
know.
point.
It was weird. And like, I didn't really buy that, like, this was the way that the elves needed like this almost Deus Ex Machina to like survive their race. But yet also they used it to forge these 3 rings, which presumably, although we can talk about this, are the 3 rings from the intro and the old trilogy, right?
Yes.
They have to
The
be,
3 rings
but
for
yet
Elven
that
Kind,
also
yep.
doesn't really follow the original introduction we're given in the original trilogy either. So
Mhm.
what the hell's going on here in this last scene?
A
Good
dumpster fire.
question.
Let's start with this. So Halbrand helps make these 3 rings, I'm assuming, right?
By explaining the very basics of metallurgy
Of
to
metallurgy, which-
a thousands of years old smith.
Did he forge? Let's start with this. Did he forge the 1 ring already? Is that done?
No.
No, he shouldn't even know about these rings. In the lore, the 3 rings for Elvenkind are forged in secret from Sauron after the other rings have been forged as sort of an attempt at a safeguard against them, if my memory is correct. So they've taken the lore, thrown it out the window, and any parts that left, that happen to be left behind, they used as toilet paper. This is just
I
terrible.
don't know. From what I've heard, I guess the big thing is that Sauron does not actually touch these rings.
It has been a while since I've read the Silmarillion. I admit the exact wordage might say that, but I thought they were forged in secret. I could be wrong.
The thing that's weird to me here is that Galadriel knows that Halbrand is Sauron. And yet she is okay with them using his suggestion to forge these rings.
I mean, they're kind of in a tough. They're kind of stuck. They're they have to, otherwise the elves are doomed. So they're kind of.
But maybe even have a minute where you're like, so you guys, I just learned something that you might want to know. That dude who just told us about alloys, guess who he actually is? Let me just run this name by you. Maybe I'll have it appear dramatically on the screen, and you can tell me if you've ever heard this word before. Sauron.
That's fair. Yeah.
The fact that
talk about
it, she doesn't even bring it up. I don't know. The whole thing there is just silly.
It's very sloppy.
Well, that's right. I just got really confused because I assumed the elf, dwarf, and human rings were all forged at roughly the same time.
No, I believe the rest of this series, or at least next season, I think we're going to see the forging of all of the rings.
Probably, yeah.
That's why it's called the Rings of Power.
So the elves get theirs now.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
there was that whole dance, we didn't know were going to end up being rings. They're like, well, what if we forge a circlet so the light, filters back into itself? Well, we don't have enough mithril for that. Well, what if we forge a pair of bracelets or whatever the second thing is? So
that was bad.
And then Galadriel says something or someone says something like, 2 will cause conflict, but 3 is balanced. What? Have you ever seen a scale? I mean, yeah, that line made no sense, but they needed to make 3 rings for some reason. So
I think maybe they meant, I took that as more politically, 3 is less than one side versus the other side, but
you have to have a majority somehow,
right?
Yeah.
You can always have a vote, and there's at least a clear winner that way.
I guess it's just that whole thing. Also, on a pettier note, the stones that they put into the rings, they're they expound upon how beautiful they are and whatnot. They look like costume jewelry. They aren't even cut in a standard setting or anything. It's just lumps of rock. I'm like, that's hideous.
Which is weird because this show, it's the most expensive show ever made, and it looks like it for the most part. It looks really good production wise. But I agree, that stood out to me too. I was like, really? That's what they look like?
Yeah.
Well, here at the TVA, we just use them as paperweights. So
I get it.
Throwback to Loki.
That was a low-key throwback.
Oh. Yeah, so this last part just seemed messy to me. I was confused on who made what, and if there were supposed to be more rings, if he already had made the one ring, if he's going to come back and remake this one ring. Is the one ring made with mithril in the books? I'm so confused by that. I didn't even know the rings were made with it, so...
I'm not sure if they were, in all honesty. The show needed a MacGuffin for, Elrond to go and try and find, I think is what it boiled down to. I don't remember if mithril was...
I know at least some of the rings were made with mithril, but I don't know what the one ring is made out of.
So the idea here is they have the rings made with that 3 people can wear, and that magically saves the race. Is that what's going on?
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
Do they each have to take a turn wearing the ring? I'm confused here.
Yeah, what practically does this do to help save the elves? That's what I don't understand either.
I don't quite remember. I mean, I'm thinking back to what I remember of the Silmarillion, and I honestly thought the 3 elven rings were forged as sort of a safe measure against the other rings that had been forged for men and dwarves. I didn't think there was any of this. We need to save the light of the tree that's gone, which also was not destroyed in the way the show said. It was eaten by Ungoliant, who is the mother of Shelob, and so you're trudging through a quagmire of half-formed ideas, and inconsistencies that don't really add up to anything in this show. At least nothing that makes sense.
I did just do a quick Google, and according to the internets, the three rings were made by Celebrimbor after Sauron in the guise of Anatar left a region. These were free of Sauron's influence, as he did not have a hand in their making. However, they were still forged by Celebrimbor with arts taught to him by Sauron, and thus were still bound to the One Ring. So I don't really know what that means, if they're not influenced by him, but they're still bound to the One Ring. But
yeah,
it sounds like it was still inspired by Sauron's craft.
Right. I don't think he knew they existed in the actual lore, but because the One Ring predates them, it still holds a sway over them, even though they came later, I think is how that went. It's, again, been a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just so much to this whole sequence that raises questions that I'm really curious to see how they're going to answer in any sort of satisfying way.
Honestly, yeah, like this scene was the majority of the problem I had with the show, to be honest, was the ending. Like, I had less quibbles about some of the things some of you have mentioned, and just this last scene, I was like, I don't get, there's so many questions I have about what just happened.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I really enjoyed the series overall, but I do feel like all the different threads just kind of fall apart. Like, none of it really adds up.
Right. And yeah, it is a show that's supposed to take place over multiple seasons, but you still want to give people a reason to come back other than trying to figure out what the hell is going on. You have to, each season should end in a satisfying manner on its own without it being just a giant question mark of what did I just see at the end there.
Well, I'm not the first person to say this about the show, but I agree that I think the problem with this season overall is that they almost were trying to do like a J.J. Abrams mystery box where they're just setting up all these things. Like there are all these reveals that in the end don't even really end up being reveals because we, the audience, already know where it's going. But they put so much time into setting up, like, who is the stranger? You know, like,
who are these three wraiths? Or,
like, there's like all these questions, and it's like, instead of doing that, you could have just invested time into like developing characters and plot and, beefed up the writing instead of just trying to surprise the audience with things that they already know.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I do agree with you that like they tried to make a lot of mystery for perhaps no reason. I don't know why they did it necessarily.
Because you have to give the audience something, to latch onto, because nobody has the attention for character building anymore, I guess.
Well,
that's probably the line of reasoning.
I think that's a lot of the critical, problem I'm hearing online about this, though, is like the characters didn't have enough of that stuff. So maybe they, I don't know, but
yeah.
Anyway, you guys want to head into some wrap-up activities here?
Sure.
So I'll just throw this out quickly because I had mentioned this before we got on the air. I took some reviews off a few websites. I'll get to those in just a second here. But IGN had a poll, which I thought was kind of fun. So I was just going to ask all of you, and maybe you guys already answered this. Like maybe you'll guess some of your answers. But it said, I was going to ask who is your favorite character, but their poll had a nice little spin on this, which is who is your favorite pair from Lord of the Rings of Power? Choices being Elrond and Galadriel. Elrond and Durin, Poppy and Nori, Galadriel and Halbrand, Arondir and Bronwyn, or Nori and the Stranger.
I mean, Elrond and Durin all day long.
I figured that's what you were going to say.
Yeah. Had the Harfoots not turned into self-destructive little shits, I probably would have said what was some of them. But Elrond and Durin, because they felt like the most genuine characters to me. I know you don't agree, but
speaking of go ahead, Brett. Sorry.
I probably would go the same way. I was trying to think if any other ones had more meaning to them than that, but between Nori and the Stranger was a kind of cool interaction, but it in the end really doesn't have that much to it. Because for most of that stranger guy like didn't have anything to like give back. It was just like
I'm good.
I'm good.
But yeah, I think it
plus
would have to
ready.
be my answer to that would have to be Elrond and Duran.
This will shock everybody. I probably wouldn't pick them.
Who would you pick?
I was going to pick Arondir and Bronwyn, actually, but now that more I think about this, I think I may actually take Galadriel and Halbrand. I just like their plot through the episodes up until the last episode. But Elrond and Durin are a good pair. If they had just changed a few things, I would be on board with all of you.
I will say I did like the Harfoots. I liked Nori and Mary. Is it
Poppy? I think
Poppy? Mary is the Hobbit.
Poppy is her
Poppy
friend.
Poppy's
and
their
Nori.
friend, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Puppy.
Poppy.
Here's the thing about Nori and Poppy, though. At the end, Nori's going off with the stranger, and there's this whole big dramatic goodbye between the two of them. And it's like, Poppy's the only member of her family. Why doesn't she just go with Nori? Like, there's literally no moment where she's like, let me come with you. Or Nori's like, maybe you could come with us.
I thought for sure they were going to do that.
I mean, I guarantee in season 2, it's going to turn out that she followed them or something. Like she's going to go with them in some capacity, but it's just so stupid that there's this like big tearful goodbye. And it's like, if only there was a solution to this situation.
I think it kind of depends if they're going to bring the Harfoots back in season 2.
They have to.
Other than the Nori plot line. Like, because past her, like, do we care about any of those characters now?
Well, but I'm saying,
I was
like,
kind of thinking
mean,
as well that they might just go by the wayside.
Yeah.
That's true.
Because
I bet Poppy will show up, though.
if they're going to bring them back, then, like, Poppy seemed to be like the new Sadok. She was kind of like the new leader, it felt like. But if they're not going to bring them back, then yeah, why not just have her come with them?
Fair.
That is fair.
Yeah. Joe, you said you had a little something for us?
I do have a game that I wanted to see if you guys would want to play.
All right.
Okay.
It's called Who Said It? Adar or 2024 presidential candidate Donald John Trump.
The same person. Have you ever seen them in the same room together?
Good
I'm
point.
I'm going to read a quote, and I want one of you gentlemen to tell me who said this.
Okay.
You have been told many lies. Some run so deep, even the rocks and roots now believe them. To untangle it all would require the creation of a new world. But that is something only the gods can do. And I am no god, at least not yet. But I am huge.
Oh, you added that part in.
I did add that last part. I bet no one can guess who that was.
Far too eloquent to be anyone. To be anyone but the other option we have.
Oh, all right. Let me see if you
Gotta
guys.
be Adar.
Yeah.
Let me see if you got. You'll never get this one. All right. So this is either Adar or, once again, former and possibly future president Donald J. Trump. Again, one of these is the complicated leader of a possibly misunderstood group of people who everyone thinks is evil, but maybe they just want love. The other one is a man who was actually elected to run our country and recently announced that he'll be running for that position again. All right, here's the quote.
Adar's running for president?
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's her with the gold. I better use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. Just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Oh, boy.
Grab them by the pussy.
Hey, let's say
You can do
Adar.
anything. It was Adar. It was Adar.
He invented Tic Tacs.
I'm just kidding.
They're made with mithril.
That's
Yes.
it. It wasn't really a game. I just wanted to try to keep the tradition going.
Oh my gosh.
Nice.
That's funny.
Ah,
Before we get to reviews here, I did steal some reviews online just to kind of put out there what other people were thinking. This is another show, like many we have looked at this podcast, where it has a lot of high reviews and a lot of very, very low bomb reviews on this. Justified or not, I don't know. But just to put some ideas out there for everybody to think about as we're heading to review time, unless anybody else had any other comments they wanted to get to here.
I think I'm good.
Triple checking. Okay.
Go for it.
All right. Review. I just took a paragraph off each of these. So this is Forbes. Said, in every way that truly matters, The Rings of Power fails, from the writing to the acting to the presentation. It fails as an adaptation, neither enriching Tolkien's work nor remaining true to it. It fails as good fantasy, giving us generic tropes and melodrama rather than blazing new ground. And it fails as a compelling story filled with cheap mystery boxes and unsurprising twists. For your consideration. This is from Polygon. It says, ironically, The Rings of Power has so many things to show us. Dwarven halls, human navies, elven woods, all of it beautiful. The virtually unlimited budget the series has never failed when it comes to sights and texture. This is a Middle-earth that people live in, that a viewer would want to visit. That would be a tragedy were it to face destruction. However, it's constructed with the architecture of a video game, with prominent sight lines that draw attention to what lies on the horizon, dramatic establishing shots so the viewer does not forget the majesty of the fantasy cities they visit, and thoughtful costuming that tells you where every person is from. Perhaps it is no mistake that it is more interesting to imagine oneself in this version of Middle-earth's Second Age than it is to conjure the inner lives of any of the characters The Rings of Power actually populates it with. And then two more here quickly. The Guardian said the biggest issue, the one that caused the bulk of the sniggering, was the acting. This is a show that with a sprawling cast blasted across a number of locations, there is no consistency whatsoever. People don't seem to have been told what sort of show they are supposed to be acting in. It's bizarre. And then for contrast,
Fake news.
For contrast here, for IGN, they said The Rings of Power largely succeeds by staying faithful to Tolkien's themes and tone, if not all of the specifics of his canon. Some inconsistent plotting, unnecessary misdirection slow it down, but it doesn't derail the story. When it reaches its climax in the 6th episode, it all comes together brilliantly. Amazon's massive budget has produced some of the most remarkable sets or scenes ever on TV, creating a strong successor to Peter Jackson's beloved Lord of the Rings trilogy. Yet The Rings of Power also remembers it's the little moments of humor and character growth that really make Middle-earth come alive. So reviews are definitely all over the place for this one, not only from the viewers, but also from the reviewing sites, which is, I think that's more telling than just randomly looking at, the review bombs and people that are trolling the numbers just to try to get them to where they want to be. People don't know what to make of this one. And it was definitely a split audience, it seemed like, online for reception on this. So that all being said, dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun.
Oh no.
Do we know what our numbers are going to be for this one?
I think I just settled on one.
Did you roll a 6-sided die?
No.
A 4-sider.
D20?
A DISA 20.
Oh. She would bust out a DISA 20.
DISA nuts, am I right?
Oh, Jenka.
Oh.
Naughty. All right. Anybody want to go first on this one? I'm still trying to just maybe wrap this all up.
I mean, I can go. I can actually be quick and concise for once.
Okay.
I will give this series a 7 out of 10. I actually agree with a lot of the reviews Cody read in various parts. But long story short, I had a lot of fun with the ride. It doesn't all add up at the end. I think it does a good job of making you feel like you're revisiting Middle Earth for a while, which is all I really wanted out of the series.
That's a great point.
It is messy, but I am excited for season 2 when it comes out in 2024. And I'm hoping that they will manage to. I mean, I know that they're already in production, but I'm hoping they'll take some of the criticisms to heart, and maybe season 2 will be stronger.
So 7 out of 10.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll jump in here. I enjoyed it for the most part through the whole season. It kept my attention like through the whole season, which other shows don't always do that for me. I was excited to get to the next episode to see what was going to happen. I, for the most part, liked the characters. We didn't get a lot of information or a lot of time with the characters to really get a good love of them and a lot of times. But for the most part, I thought the acting was pretty good. I thought casting was good. I thought that the spectacle of it was probably the biggest selling point. It looked amazing in a lot of places, pretty much everything. I think so. The thought that when you were reading those reviews, this thought came to me that I just constantly see these headlines when I'm scrolling through whatever Google or whatever, and half of them have the term jaw dropping in them. So and so did this jaw dropping thing, and I'm like, you read it and it's like, what? He was just brushing his teeth or something. It was something mundane. It's like,
well, you have to drop your jaw to brush your teeth.
My jaw is firmly in place.
I feel like a lot of these reviews, that's all it is. It's just them overselling everything, just to get some views to their what they're writing.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say it's amazing, but a lot of those things, there certainly were parts of the reviews that Cody read that I was like, yeah, okay, I agree with that. That's I'm not going to try and convince me otherwise of that, but a lot of it is just I don't understand why someone would have that opinion. And I definitely, this it's coming from when we did Wheel of Time, and it was kind of flipped where I was like, I know so much about that series and the lore and everything, and so watching the show, there was a lot of points where it was like, oh god, I hate this. I don't like this, what they're doing right now. And I can totally see where people who have read the books and know and are big fans would watch this and they'd be like, dude, you can't do this. What the hell are you doing? But from the standpoint of somebody who does not know that lore, I enjoyed the most part what they did. The biggest problem for me was at the end, we have a bunch of questions and they're not the good kind of questions where you're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? It's like, why the hell did that happen here? That's the question that you get in a lot of points. But sum it all up here, I would probably give it 7 out of 10. It had some issues. I definitely could see from the lore side, there's definitely some big issues there, but it was interesting. It held my attention. I thought a lot of it was done well. So 7 out of 10.
I'll jump in next because I think Justin may be the most unique here, but we'll see.
All righty, go ahead.
It's funny. I listen back to our podcasts when we record them and they're published, and then I always hear me say it's really tough. It just I use the same phrase every time, but this one is hard because we have a return to a world that we're familiar with, and that has to be factored in here with my final rating for this. When we watched the original trilogy play out over those years that it came out, it was fantastic. Still to this day, I think it holds up really well. And it's a story that I still to this day have never read. I've never read Lord of the Rings to this day. I've still only experienced that original trilogy movie. I love it. I love the characters. I love everything about it. When The Hobbit came out, that felt just a smidge new, but was basically the same world, had some crossover characters, and, again, felt very familiar to it. So I was really into that. I don't think it's as good as the original trilogy, but I don't think it was ever intended to be expanded into a 3-movie arc either. that's neither here nor there. With this one, when we come into this, it is like a return to that world, but it's different enough with the characters that you see in the locations, especially in this first season, that are unfamiliar to people that watched just those trilogies and don't know all the behind the scenes book stuff. That I kind of agree with, I think something Brett just said. It was just, or maybe it's Joe, one of you two said it was really nice to just go back to that world again. And it did feel like it fit in that world, but definitely, oh, was Aragon? But it definitely did feel different. Like, besides the couple elf characters here, we mostly had entirely new places and people, and like trying to make sense of a plot that's going to somehow eventually lead up to what we're familiar with. But I don't know if they hit on all cylinders, as we talked about here as the series went on. So if this were just a random TV show that didn't have the Lord of the Rings name on it, and I watched this, I'm trying to think what I would rank this, like once you take out that little bit of familiarity and nostalgia factor. And it was... So
if it was just : The Rings of Power?
I don't know that they would start the title with just a colon. It'd be a bold choice, but actually some shows should do that because that'd be really funny. Colon. But it was, like I said, particularly the ending really kind of bothered me, and there were some moments along the way that kind of didn't make a lot of sense either. I did like the character work for the most part, and I think I hear all of you saying, and some of those reviews were also kind of saying somehow they managed to simultaneously get good performances out of everyone, but then also they didn't have necessarily the right direction as to where they were supposed to go with those performances. So that's kind of an interesting praise that people are giving to the actors and actresses, to be like, you did a really good job doing something that you weren't really supposed to know what you were doing with. Anyway, all that to say, I'd probably be with the nostalgia factor here, just going back to Middle Earth and getting into all this stuff. I'm going to go 7 out of 10 as well, which is hopefully Justin has us someplace off here. But I also want to point out that I tend to rank things a little bit higher, I feel like, than most of the hosts on here. And I know Dave, in particular for his MCU, always says like he ranks it against the other MCU stuff. I mostly rank all my things against other options of things I would watch, movies or TV or whatever else. So if I'm constantly giving stuff like 7 or 8 out of 10, it's only because I know there's a lot of shit out there I would not enjoy that I'm just not reviewing. So to explain why I'm, 7's not my 5. I'm saying 7's actually a 7 to me. So, all right, Justin, hit us.
All right. 8.5.
Bullshit.
Hours of my life that I want back. Where to begin with this? In all honesty, I would not have finished watching this if we weren't reviewing it. I would have stopped probably around like episode 4 or 5, somewhere thereabouts. And because it's a show that really, it doesn't feel like it has a solid direction.
You wouldn't even got to the Nori Poppy love scene if you stopped there.
But I mean, it tries to manufacture drama where we know there can't be any, like Isildur and Galadriel. Are they okay? Of course they're okay. They show up in in the movies we're already familiar with. And there's the complete. I'm not a Tolkien scholar by any means. I'm not that narcissistic to think that I know all the ins and outs, but I know a fair bit. And just what I know of the lore, it's been butchered. But even aside from that, the show isn't even internally consistent with what it's doing, as evidenced by all the questions we had with what the heck happened at the end. So it's not even for someone who's completely removed from all the extended history and whatnot. It's still kind of hard to follow at parts, which is not the mark of good writing. There's the smaller things that I talked about, like well, if you can call a volcanic eruption a smaller thing, but people living through that. There's the whole the bait and switch with the Harfoots, of seeming like they're just relatively good people, and then oh nope, sorry, you're left to die. There's just so much in this show that either is poorly executed or never really developed, or just trods on things that came before it, which technically are things that come after it, because the movies that could take place after the fact are in the future. But it's just this thing is a mess. It's pretty. The performances are good for what the actors have been given. That's about the best I can say about this thing. Actual review, 2 out of 10. I would not have stopped. I would not have continued watching this.
Wow.
Holy shit.
It is going to be a hard sell to get me to watch season 2. If we review it, I'll get through it somehow. But I despised this.
Is that the lowest fond score ever?
Wow. There was something that got a lower score, but I don't know if it was 2 out of 10. Oh, it's probably like our supernatural ones.
Yeah, Bigfoot or aliens or whatever. Yeah.
So you're putting the odds of this being a good show just slightly higher than Bigfoot existing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Pretty much.
My God.
Yeah, I went into it with an open mind. I was cautiously optimistic, and
then you saw Morfydd Clark's ugly face.
I saw what they did with established characters and how new characters didn't get enough time to shine, and how events just didn't play out in a way that really worked. And yeah, it's just, the more I think about it, and the more I look at even like smaller details or broad strokes, no matter the approach I take, it's just the show doesn't work. And I am not even like the world's biggest Lord of the Rings fan or anything, but I enjoy the stories. I think, as I said in our review of the first couple episodes, one of my earliest memories is of my dad reading chapters of The Hobbit to me when I was a kid, just before I went to sleep. So I do have a history with it. I do like this world. It means something to me, even if I'm not, the world's biggest fan. And I just don't like what $1 billion has given us. It could have been so much more. It should have been so much more, and it's not.
Ouch.
That would probably be my biggest, perhaps my biggest negative about it is the how much that they put into it. We should have gotten more out of it.
I mean, I do believe that a lot of that went just to the rights, which is weird because
Probably.
They only own the rights to the appendices. Like, They don't actually own the Silmarillion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I think they have the rights to the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the appendices. But for this series, they're only working with the appendices, which is why they're creating so much stuff, because they don't really have enough source material for the period they're covering to fill it. But I mean, I totally understand, for someone who is, at least somewhat steeped in the lore, I could see why it would be frustrating.
Yeah. And I can only imagine like what someone who's, favorite, fantasy series of all time, what is the Lord of the Rings, in its entirety. I can only imagine what their feelings on this must be.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I feel like we could get into a larger discussion about adaptations, but that's for another time.
Sure.
Dinosaurs aren't real.
What?
Well, not anymore.
It's true.
No, that attitude. Actually, weren't they just talking in the news about trying to bring one back to life?
There's
the tie-in we needed. All right. All right. Are we good on this, ladies and gents? Anybody else? I don't know if we can come back from Justin's harsh criticism here.
I mean, it's how he feels.
Yeah.
He's entitled.
Yeah, and we have to disagree, at least somewhat often. Otherwise, our name is a lie. So.
I mean, 3 of us did give it the exact same score, so it's good that Justin is disagreeing with us.
That gives us a 21, 23 points. So Justin still only brought our average down like to a 6 or something. So but still low enough that he dropped 3 other people's ratings. So good job, Justin.
I do what I can.
That was impressive. All right. Well, we're going to wrap this up and say goodbye to everybody here on this episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. I guess we'll go out with a little song here as you see fit for the end of this show, whatever your emotions and feelings for Rings of Power.
That's just going to be one long fart sound effect from my end. So
Don't make me laugh like that. I don't have the lung capacity at the moment.
Sorry.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time, everybody, on Friends.
Occasionally.
Hey, yo, I'm not disagreeing.
Disagree.
Apparently, we wrapping this one, so there's that.